Sorry, assholes, your quiet day at the office is about to get severely fucked up.
Guys, welcome back to the After Action Review. You know me, I'm Nick Guy, the world's most okayest Green Beret. And today is a treat because we have somebody that is, well, we kind of always bring guests that aren't okay. We always bring guests in who are at the top of their fields. And we have Sergeant Major Mike Vining, former EOD technician, former Master Breacher, for Special Force Operational Detachment Delta Force Combat Applications Group, Army Compartmentalized Element, whatever you want to call them. Sergeant Major, it's great to have you on. And real quick, let's just go right through. We'll go right through. Sorry, we had a little bit of an issue with the connection, but I want to go through his bio real quick because it is impressive. I wish my DD-214 read like this. So, Sergeant Major Vining, he completed basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, went to EOD school, served with the 99th Ordnance Detachment in Vietnam, completed 12 months of combat duty, and then he was actually discharged from the Army. This is something I did not know. He re-entered the Army in 1973 and was assigned to the 63rd Ordnance Detachment, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. In 1978, he was accepted into Delta Force, where he served until 1985. He completed OTC, or Operator's Training Course, and participated in numerous combat operations, including Operation Eagle Claw, the Iranian Hostage Rescue Mission, Urgent Fury, the invasion of Grenada, and then from 85 to 86, assigned back to EOD, then went back to CAG, and he served as Chief EOD Technician, Research and Development Sergeant Major, and Breaching Sergeant Major. And I'm not going to bore you guys with the rest of the details because it's just kind of, it has no meaning coming from me. So we're going to bring it back to Sergeant Major. Again, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, it's, we talked a little bit before we hit record. You're a little bit aware of the meme, but you're a big deal in military circles on the internet. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nick. Where'd you like me to start and to kind of highlight what my experiences, say, in Vietnam, or?
Yeah, I want to start off in Vietnam because we all know you through Delta Force. So I want to start off with Vietnam because I read that the achievement that you're most proud of in your military career is your EOD badge.
Yes, yeah, and the CIB.
And the CIB.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to start there in your EOD days of Vietnam.
Yeah. Well, I was in tech after EOD school. I was in tech escort at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland, and then I volunteered for Vietnam. Finally got orders for Vietnam. So I entered Vietnam in February of 1970, and I was assigned to the 99th Ordnance Detachment, EOD, and we were based out of Phuc Vinh. At that time was called Camp Gorvad, and later on it was named Camp Casey when General Casey was killed after the incursion into Cambodia. So we had about 15 Army EOD units in total in Vietnam, scattered throughout the country. And what we do is we divide it up into zones. So the 99th, we operated on the northwest area of 3 Corps, just northwest of Saigon, up against the Cambodian border. So We supported all of 1st Cav's operations in the area, part of the 1st Infantry Division when they were there, and then they pulled out. The 199th Light Infantry Brigade, 11th ACR, and then we had 2 on-site teams. The first one was at Quan Loy, and the second one was when we moved out of Quan Loy, we went to Song Bay, which was known as Fire Support Base Buttons. So I was there in Vietnam from February 70 to January 71. The big thing was during that time frame was the incursion into Cambodia. In May of June of 1970, Nixon authorized us to go for 60 days into Cambodia. So that was a busy time for us. We were doing operations across the border. 1st Cav was finding a lot of enemy caches. Right there at the beginning of the war in May, they discovered 1st of the 9th Pink Team helicopters discovered some caches in the jungle, stacks of ammunition. So then 2nd of the 12th 1st Cav went in there and secured it, and they found 28 cache sites in the jungle, and then they called us in to dispose of the cache sites. So that became known as Rock Island East. Rock Island East was the largest enemy weapons and ammunition cache that was discovered during the war. There was over 327 tons of weapons and ammunition in those 28 cache sites. And so we had a 7-man team, EOD team, that went in there and set it up to blow. Initially they lost 7 soldiers capturing the cache site and 20 wounded. And then while we occupied the cache site for about 6 days, we had 3 more deaths. It was an accidental death with a claymore. It was an automatic ambush that they had set up around our perimeter, and they were taking it down, and it functioned. So these were scattered along the trail, both sides of the trail. So we had to use detonating cord and cover it up with all the blocks. We brought in like 300 cases of C4 to prime it, and we had dual detonating cord lines that we buried because we kept getting contact. The enemy was just trying to see if they could find any vulnerable sections of our perimeter. And so as we set this up, we started to, then we had a 2-ship HLZ to bring the helicopters to come down to exfil out. So we had a small security team there with us, and the last 2 helicopters, and we had 10 priming systems of 15 minutes, and then we had these charges around the perimeter to keep the enemy away as we withdrew out of the perimeter. So this is the funny part. We lit the priming charges, and we got on the helicopters. And the helicopters, we were too overloaded, and with the helicopters not getting the amount of maintenance they needed, we couldn't take off. After we lit the fuse charges, we were just too much. So the door gunner taps me on the shoulder and says, I'll have to get on the helicopter behind me, and a couple other guys had to get out. Well, the helicopter behind us had a problem, so here's like 5 of us there, and the helicopters are going off. So I was getting ready to go over and cut the fuses again, and another helicopter circling around came down and picked us up. It was exciting times. Oh, while this was going on, our scare charges were going off. Helicopter pilots thought we were getting mortared, and so anyway, came in and picked us off, and they could see our mushroom cloud from 50 miles away. So it was a pretty big shot.
Oh my God. So, all right. So, we have a lot of vets that tune in, listen to this. I think most guys are familiar with a BIP. most guys have done it in their careers at some point. But I like I mean, we all know P, P stands for plenty, but really that's not the case when you're dealing with something this large and you're trying to lay this in while taking fire. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, you don't hear anything like that.
Yeah, we took ground to air fire as we departed, and I forget how far we were away when it blew up. Weren't that far away. I do have photos of the shot going off.
So that was the largest BIP in the Vietnam War, and was that the third largest? Because I know you were
that
was
the largest, called
Okay.
Rock Island East. It was named after the Rock Island Arsenal. That's where is it? Is it in Illinois or Rock Island Arsenal? So because it was so large, we had there was over about 1,000 rounds of 85 millimeter fixed ammunition that we blew up there, and the 85 millimeter fixed Chi-Com ammunition is either for the T-34 tank or the D-44 85 millimeter Hauser. So though we did not see any T-34 tanks or any of those big field guns, they had stocked the ammunition up certainly for that. They had like 1,000 rounds. After the 2 months of incursion in Cambodia, things were quiet for a long time, for about 6 months before they started to rebuild back up. Because we were at this point in the war withdrawing. We were under the Vietnamization program, where the South Vietnamese were taking over a lot of our fire support bases. And the second largest enemy weapons and ammunition cache was the place called the City. That was in Cambodia too. The City, I wasn't on the City. The City was a built-up area. They had schoolhouse, barracks, hospital, motor pool, and a weapons and ammunition storage area. And so that was the second largest. And the third largest was a place called Warehouse Hill, and that was in Cambodia. And I was on that. I was part of a 4-man EOD team, and we blew that up. It was Warehouse Hill was a ridge line that had tunnels dug inside of it, and there was about 14 cache sites that were underground. And so we put in explosives and we blew up that. And that was the third largest, Warehouse Hill. You can't find anything on the internet or anything about Warehouse Hill. It's like never.
Why is that?
I don't know why it's not in any history, but I do have the incident report from all this stuff.
Man, that's incredible. Now I want to circle back to those 85 millimeters, because I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit, because you didn't see any. There were no T-34s. There were no fixed gun positions that would accept that ammunition. The current wars, our wars, the IED threat was massive. I mean, were the Vietnamese, were the communists using any of that sort of stuff to create IEDs, anything like that?
They were actually using our own ordnance, dud ordnance, to make IEDs, whether it be a 250-pound bomb, a 155, or any submunitions like Blue 3B bomblet. They were converting those into anti-personnel mines. They were even converting them into hand grenades. So they were using a lot of our dud ordnance, they would take like a 105 round, put it up in a bunker complex, and they'd take our 105s and put them up in trees above the bunkers, so that when we would approach the bunkers, they would set the 105s off that were in the trees. So I didn't see too much of them converting their ammunition, but they certainly converted our ammunition.
Man, and in case anybody's listening that's not in the know, there's a reason we don't use dispersal bombs anymore. I'm gonna nerd out a little bit with the JTAC piece, but we don't use dispersal bombs because of the high dud rate with the bomblets. But they're also highly unstable. So these guys were, I mean, they were brave enough to use bomblets as hand grenades. I mean, that's incredible. Like, again, like, this is nothing that I've ever read. That's amazing. I have a little bit of respect for
Oh
that.
yeah,
I
I've
mean, that's
seen videos that showing the Vietnamese, like the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese, they're taking a bomb, like a 250, 500-pound bomb, and actually sawing it in two, and then with hammers knocking out the explosives to reuse the explosives.
man, that's wild. That is wild. I mean, well, you know, ingenuity knows no bounds, especially when
Yeah.
especially when you're a guerrilla force. So,
Yeah.
all right, I wanted to hit on that because, you know, your Vietnam service is something that kind of gets shadowed, and those are incredible stories. I still, you know, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that's trying to destroy an enemy cache, you know, under fire and setting up basically screening charges to keep them out of the wire while you get on the bird and then you know, fly away from a mushroom cloud that's visible 50 miles away. So I wanted to hit that's an incredible story. So after Vietnam, you left the Army, correct?
Yeah, the war, you know, yeah, I wasn't thinking about making the military a career, and the war was winding down, so I got out, went back to Michigan, got a job working in a factory making Ford body parts, press operator. But I was looking at, you know, it was a good job, it was paid well, but I just couldn't see doing that for 20, 30 years. And then in 1973, the Israel and the Arabs were at it again, the Yom Kippur War, and 82nd was put on alert. So I went down, saw a recruiter, and at this time they weren't taking very many prior services back into the military because Vietnam had downsized, but they were taking EOD. So the recruiter says, well, you will come back in, but you'll have to come back in as EOD. And I says, fine. I says, I wouldn't come back anything else. And so anyway, I went to Fort Leonard Wood. So I was at Fort Leonard Wood from 73 to 78, and just doing, you know, conventional EOD stuff at a basic training post, engineer post 2. And I was actually getting bored with EOD at that point. And so I volunteered for Special Forces. As a Special Forces medic, I took EMT training. And so I had a school date to go through Special Forces, but then I got a phone call from a sergeant major at our control and said that they're forming a new unit up at Fort Bragg, and they're looking for 6 EOD techs in this new unit. And he gave me a telephone number. So I called Fort Bragg, and person answered the phone, told him a little bit about who I was, and they were looking for NCOs that had combat experience. And so he said, can come down for an interview. So I flew to Bragg, and then that was where they're forming up Delta Force, and at the old stockade on Butner Road.
Yeah.
And yeah, they kicked the prisoners out and put them downtown there in Fayetteville at the county jail. And then we took over the stockade. But 2 weeks later, I PCS'd to Fort Bragg, and they were starting. So there were 6 of us, 6 EOD folks that went to Bragg, and they were starting the first operator training course. So we had to go through. We had to do the 15-mile night march with a 40-pound pack timed, and then we had to do the 5-event PT test and had to do the swim test. But then we started OTC. We did not go through selection. We just, because they're starting the first OTC course and they wanted us in, but under the understanding that we would have to go through and pass the selection process upon completing. So we were doing things backwards, and only 2 of us made it through OTC, was Dennis Wolf and myself. And then we went and did the fall selection in 78 and passed that. And then we had 6 in OTC2 and only 1 person in OTC2 EOD. So we only had 3 EOD folks that made it through OTC and the selection process. And then the 3 of us were all legs. So then we had to go to jump school. And but we went to jump school at Fort Bragg. Let's see, the 7th Special Forces Group were running a jump school at Bragg. So we went through that jump school. And so we only had 3 EOD folks, and they wanted 6. So they took, at that time, you know, before the 18 series, Special Forces had, you know, the same like 12B and 11B. And so we had some 12Bs, and we actually sent them to EOD school. So to order to have a total of 6 into the unit. So those guys then would be our assistant whenever we had to do any EOD work. They would help us out, the 3 Special Forces guys that went through.
Go ahead.
And basically then we became, our unit became, well, what do you call it? Anyway, we became certified.
Okay.
And you know, 5th group had stood up a unit called Blue Light. A lot of people thought Delta and Blue Light were one of the same, but Blue Light was a interim group that was set up, and then as soon as we became online, the Blue Light was dismantled. And
So,
a lot of the guys there's several people from Blue Light that actually came through the, you know, selection process into Delta.
yeah, there was a great private range about 45 minutes outside of Clarksville, and it was owned and ran by a former 5th group dude who was with Blue Light, and he was telling me, like, yeah, part of our Q course, part of, you know, for that mission specific, was to go through OTC back then, which was shocking to me. I had no idea that was a thing. But I mean, going through, you know, now, you know, nowadays when it comes to Delta, you know, EOD assets kind of fall under that direct support role. So, but you know, again, this is weird. You know, it's fascinating. You know, in the early days, you know, they wanted EODs as qualified operators.
Yeah.
And was there any specific reason why?
Well, because of the counterterrorist mission, you know, at that time, we had an unclassified mission. Our unclassified mission was POW rescue. Basically, because of what happened in Vietnam and Son Tay, how they had to create this special rescue force up at Fort Bragg, then send them over there. And of course, when they got over there and they did the Son Tay raid, the prison was empty.
Yeah.
And the reason the prison was empty is not because it was because of the monsoons. The prison had flooded, and so they moved the prisoners. It wasn't anything that got leaked out, but we wanted to have a stand-up force that would do, you know, POW type rescues. So then our classified mission would have been, you know, rescuing hostages, say, trapped on an airliner that they were being held hostage. That was popular at the time. The terrorists were hijacking aircraft and keeping people on planes and stuff like that. So stand-up thing. And Beckwith, of course, he opened Delta up MOS immaterial. You know, he wanted people with different skills. He wanted people that were heavy equipment, had a heavy equipment operator background. He wanted people that were cooks. He wanted people for all different skills, but in a counter-terrorist thing, you needed people with different skills. If you need somebody to get on a bulldozer and run a bulldozer, you have somebody that would do it. You need somebody to pretend they're a chef, or to deliver, you know, to do food or whatever. So though most of the people came from the Special Forces and Ranger background, we did have people from armor, all different fields, and we did have one cook. So he wanted people with various skill backgrounds for counter-terrorists.
Well, he was definitely ahead. He was ahead of his time because the special operations community has kind of embraced that. At least within the Special Forces Regiment with the whole 18 X-ray program, which I went to college before I enlisted. And, I came into the Army with 0 Army experience. And that was kind of the idea, to bring people in with all sorts of life experiences, which would make the organization better. So he was a little ahead of his time, because I know back, in the 70s, the Army was probably a little more rigid than it is today.
Yeah, he had a hard time getting the unit stood up. He had the vision based on, he had spent time with the British SAS and seen how they operated. He wanted to have a unit capable just like the British SAS. And of course, our selection process was modeled exactly on the British SAS model. And then on our class, our OTC-1 class, we had guys from the British SAS as instructors coming in and shooting, as marksman instructors and stuff like that in the unit. And so our unit has always been closely aligned with the British SAS.
Now, I don't know if it's a true story or if it's just rumor, but in those first OTC classes, they had SAS, like you said, SAS marksman instructors. Were they sawing the sights off of Stens?
We had M3 grease guns, 45 caliber. Okay. Yeah, we had the M3. Beckwith got, that's our first assault rifles, was the M3 grease gun. Yes, he had our sights taken off our weapons because we were doing instinctive shooting. We were shooting at 3x5 cards. We shot up a lot of 3x5 cards. And double tapping, the SAS taught us to double tap to 2 rounds. And you can actually, with the M3 grease gun, do a pretty good job of double tapping with your finger control. It's easy to just do 1 target, 2 rounds, another target, 2 rounds. And it was all instinctive, close quarter battle, instinctive shooting is what we were taught. And then, of course, with the M3, it's an open bolt, and the cover is the safety. So once you open the cover, there is no safety. But one of our guys developed, his name was Terry Hall, developed a trigger safety for the M3 grease gun. So all of our guns were modified so we would have the cover open, and we had on the handle a trigger safety.
So was that the only modification to the M3?
Yes. Yeah. Now some people cut the barrels down. Now some people had like a 3-inch barrel. But yeah, the M3 and Beckwith believed and we had 240. We always carried 245s, and we had M1911 A1s match. These were match 45s. They were really good 45s. A normal 45, you rattle it, it just shakes. These were really nice. They call match grade 45s that we had, and so we carried 245s and an M3, and of course we had, he believed in having the same kind of ammunition, so that if you ran out of, you can cross load your ammunition because you're carrying only 45 caliber. And but during the Iran hostage Operation Eagle Claw, then we got in CAR 15s. So most of us carried CAR 15s at that time for Eagle Claw.
Okay, man. All right, we're gonna get into that. I'm still kind of reeling because nowadays in the world of high-end shooting, in the world of black side soft, you have these incredibly modified weapon systems that ensure complete accuracy and put them in the hands of a skilled shooter, and they're surgical with them. I'm just still reeling from the fact that you guys had the M3 grease gun, which was a cheap it was a cheap and easily produced. Was it like Ford Motor Company made them or something?
Oh, I don't know who. That's a good question. I never researched that.
Like back during World War II, the Thompson was too expensive and too complex to keep mass producing. So later on in the war, they replaced them with these M3s, and then they go and they saw off the sights, and they have you guys drilling holes on 3x5 carts. That is a serious testament to a CAG shooting package. It really is.
Yeah, we had to shoot 3x5 cards. Yeah.
Oh man, that's incredible. All right, so we got through OTC. Now we're coming up to Operation Eagle Claw, and you had turned me on to this great book, and I've already ordered it, but it's releasing in 5 days, correct? The 24th.
Yeah.
Okay, it's called Operation Eagle Claw 1980, the disastrous bid to end the Iran hostage crisis. And it's written by Justin Williamson. And you played an integral part in the research for this book, correct?
Yeah, I helped Justin put him in contact with a lot of people that this is going to be the most, I think. I haven't seen the book. I've proofread the draft, but this is going to be the most accurate account of what happened on the mission. Even in Beckwith's book, in which he had a writer write it, there's errors in Beckwith's book, and those errors have been repeated in other books. And for example, in Beckwith's book, we had 3 elements. We had a red element, white element, and blue element. And he got the white and blue element mixed up. The red and white element was the assault elements. The blue element was the security support element. And so, and then I was in the white element. And other errors. One of the things he said in his book was before we left the Desert One, that we had accountability of everybody, and that was not true. It was a mad to get out of there. The fixed wing aircraft at this time were very low on fuel. We could have very easily left somebody behind on Desert One. We did not have accountability. I was in the burning aircraft with my team, and we had a 4-man team. And when we got into the aircraft to get out of there, I didn't see the other 2 guys from my team. And not until we got to Marsaria in Oman, where we landed, and then we had a head count, did we know that who was there, who wasn't there. And then 8 people, of course, were left behind in the desert, who were 5 Air Force guys in the EC-130 up front were killed, and 3 Marine crewmen on the RH-53D were killed. But we could have easily left somebody behind. We had no accountability.
I mean, it's an interesting anecdote in American special operations history and lore, because I think a lot of people know about Desert One, and they know about the blunders, and they know I'm speaking from my experience. Like, all right, we had an aircraft collision, and a bunch of people were killed, but I don't think a lot of people know like what the mission was there to accomplish. I don't think a lot of people understand how it kind of plays into the Iranian hostage crisis.
Yeah, well, this was the second time the embassy was actually occupied. The first time it was just occupied I think in February of 1979, it was occupied just briefly. And then, of course, on 4 November of 79, it was occupied by the students there. And they took over and they captured several hostages. I think altogether, initially was 66 hostages. And of course, some of the embassy staff people were not in the compound at the time. They eventually made their way to the Canadian embassy, and thus the movie Argo, about how they got out of Iran. The Canadians helped them get out of Iran. And of course, then they released several of the hostages. Some of the women, there was also some people there that, you know, that they released. So they eventually held 53 hostages. And our mission was to go in and rescue those 53 hostages that were scattered around inside the embassy. It was a complex mission. You know, it was all the long range that we had to do. And the only helicopter at the time that we had to do the mission was what you call RH-53D helicopter. It's a Navy helicopter, and it's used for counter mining. What they normally do in RH-53D is they do grid patterns in the daylight, and they have mine detectors that they drag in the water, and they search for mines, and they do these grid patterns. And so that was our helicopter of choice. So initially we had when this mission was going on, we were actually out. I was with B Squadron, and we were out in Colorado skiing. We were on a ski trip, cold weather mountain training, plus a little skiing, downhill skiing. Beckwith says that, you know, he said that sometimes you get diamonds, and so that was one of our diamonds, is to go out on a ski trip. And so we were out there on November 4th when the embassy was taken. So we got the call to come on back. So we went down, we drove down to Colorado Springs, got a plane out of Colorado Springs. We landed out there at Camp McCall, and then we went right into isolation and to get ready for this mission. So, and then from there we went up to Camp Perry, Virginia, and we stayed in some buildings up at Camp Perry, and that's where we did a lot of our training. And at this time they were putting all the components together, and then we moved down to Yuma Proving Grounds in Arizona to do the actual desert part of the training at Yuma. And then we had the Navy 53s and the Navy pilots and all that. But we had problems with the Navy pilots. We had OPSEC problems. We had, they would get lost in the desert. They wouldn't land where we wanted them to land. They just couldn't grasp the night flying with night vision goggles, because they were used to flying in the daytime. So anyway, they were replaced by Marine pilots and Marine crew, and a lot of these were they weren't one helicopter crew put together. They picked from the Marine Corps. So again, we still had a train up period, and we still had problems with the helicopters. They were always our weak point. And then we had devised different plans. One plan was to actually jump into a Desert One site. We had blivets fuel bladders that would drop, and then the helicopters would come in and we'd fill them up. But we had problems with the blivet drops. Sometimes the parachutes wouldn't open, and the blivets would crash and break open. And and Beckwith didn't like the parachute operation part of it, because we could get people hurt in the parachute jump. So we take fixed wing in. So we had 3 MC-130s and 3 EC-130s. The EC-130s were our bladder birds. They had 5,000 gallons of aviation fuel in a giant bladder, and to refill the helicopters and stuff. And then the helicopters would fly off the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, and we all meet up at Desert One. Then we would go to our hide site, which was Desert Two, and it was a warehouse building where we would, outside of Tehran, and then the helicopters would move to another site and be camouflaged with nets and stuff like that, waiting for the next night to launch the mission. And We had trucks, they had people inside Iran that had round up the trucks for us to go in, and we would have a false cargo thing we'd hide behind, and we had Farsi speakers. We had some of the guys, you know, from different other services that could speak Farsi would be our drivers. And then we would pull up to the outside of the embassy walls. We had ladders with knotted ropes on the end. We'd set the ladders up. We would go over and climb down these knotted ropes over the embassy walls and go to our sectors. So we had a wall built at the stockade, and every day we had to kit out and practice going over the wall at the stockade when we were there. We had a wall built at different other places to always practice going over the wall. And so that was the plan. We got to Desert One. Well, we, of course, had the big thing was the desert, the sandstorm, the habu. This time of year, they were common, created from thunderstorms. I don't know why people didn't know about habus and weren't briefed on habus and what to do with habus, but somehow that was, the Marines never knew anything about it. When, as we flew in, and as on the fixed wing, I was on the lead MC-130. When we saw the sandstorms, the helicopter, the fixed wing aircraft just flew on top of the habus. We were going in at low level to avoid radar, and but with a habu, the sandstorm, that obscures radar, so you can fly above it and still not be detected. But the helicopters, instead of flying above it, were flying in the habu. They were trying to maintain low altitude. And we did not have secure communications with the helicopters to tell the helicopters, hey, there's what to do. There's a habu, get on top of the helicopters. And they just kept flying into it instead of getting on top of it. They did have secure radios, the helicopters did. But in order to use the secure comms, they would have to land the helicopter, go out and set up the SATCOM radio. You'd have to get your compass out and get the right elevation and azimuth. Back then, you had to do that. Nowadays, of course, you have satellite communications in your helicopters and your fixed wing. But back then, you had to actually land and set everything up. So what happened was one helicopter turned back, had some kind of problem. And I think it was an overheating problem, some component. It turned back to the aircraft carrier. Another helicopter had a blade indicator malfunction light come on. And so when you're flying Marine helicopters and you have a blade indicator light come on, you got to land immediately with that helicopter. You're flying a Marine 53. But if you're flying a Navy 53, you don't have to. They're different, but the Marines weren't aware of that, so they landed one of the helicopters and actually abandoned it. Another helicopter picked up that crew, and they abandoned it. So instead of 8 helicopters, now we have got six helicopters. And so when we landed at Desert One, well, first thing happened when we landed at Desert One, we saw lights down on the road down below, which was nobody was supposed to be down on the road. So we had to circle around a few times until the traffic cleared out. And then when we landed and opened up the doors, here's headlights coming down the road. And it was a bus carrying 44 Iranians. And Beckwith said, stop that bus. And so somebody shot a 40 millimeter round in front of that bus, and the bus came to a stop, and we boarded the bus, and we had 44 Iranian detainees that we don't, as Americans, we don't take hostages. We have detainees.
Yeah, of course.
So we had 44 Iranian detainees of our own. And then, of course, the Ranger blocking team went out, and here comes a fuel truck coming down the road. So the Rangers fire a 66 millimeter law. It it lands underneath the truck and detonates. And next thing we know, and the guy in the truck gets out and takes off. There's another truck vehicle behind it. And so that truck's kind of burning in there. So this is, and as we're landing, the fixed wings were coming in, and still no sign of the helicopters. And the helicopters came in really late, and there were 6 of them instead of the 8. And you could look at the pilot's face and the crew, that they were whipped. They had gone through 2 sandstorms, and they just were exhausted. And so then we had another helicopter that developed a hydraulic problem, and so which couldn't be fixed right away. And so now we're down to 5 helicopters. 5 is the very minimum number that we could do the mission and get the hostages and the rescue force out. If we lost another helicopter, somebody would have to stay behind. We'd get the hostages out, but some of us would have to stay behind. And and we figured that we would lose another helicopter when they went to their hide site for that night. Maybe one wouldn't start up for some reason in the morning, and then we'd be down to 4. So we had practiced. E&E was a big part of our plan. We had E&E kits sewed into our jackets. We were all carrying $10,000. We had $5,000 in Iranian money, $5,000 in American money, and maps and everything. We all had our E&E plans, and they were all recorded how we would E&E out of country. We had classes by the agency on how to steal cars, how to hotwire cars. We had hotwire kits and what cars are the best cars to steal. And at that time, there was a lot of Iranians that supported the U.S. in country, so we could get a lot of support. And we're hoping to link up with the Kurds to get to Turkey. We would have to E&E out to Turkey.
So did everybody have their own individual E&E route? Like it was.
Yes, the teams would be going to. Each team had their own E&E plan, in which we had filed how we would E&E out of country, and that was a big part of our plan. Personally, we thought the plan would go together. We would get to the embassy, we would do our job at the embassy, get the hostages, then we'd go across the street to the stadium, the soccer stadium, and that's where the helicopters would come in, and we'd get at least get the hostages out. But we thought that the helicopters would get lost around Tehran, a big city. Not all of them would show up and stuff like that. We did have some AC-130 gunships that would have been up overhead protecting us while we were there. Yeah.
But none of it really mattered. I mean, at the end of the day, anything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah. So the decision was made to abort the mission. Colonel Beth Peckwith made the decision that we couldn't afford, but we were still going to try to redo the mission at some other date. We were going to take the Iranians, detainees. We were going to take them with us, and they'd be released later, and try to redo this whole thing again. But so what happened was we got on B Squadron. We all got on this one EC-130, the Bladderbird, and we were going to go out. We were, because of the helicopters were late, the fixed wing were critically low on fuel at this time. So we needed to get the fixed wing, and helicopters were all filled up. So we need to get the fixed wings out first, and then the helicopters would go back to the carrier Nimitz. So we had 2 helicopters behind us, and the CCT was going to move the helicopters out of our way because our prop wash going to bring dirt on the helicopter. So they moved the helicopters out of our way. The one in our left rear, when it landed, it flattened its tires. It landed hard, so it had flat tires. So it could not taxi away. So it had to lift up. So as it lifted up, dust kicked up and stuff. The pilot got vertigo, came around, and he actually crashed into the front cockpit of our aircraft. We're inside, and we felt the rocking motion, and you could see the rotor blades cutting into the top of the fuselage. But we really did not have an idea that those were rotor blades, what was really happening, that a helicopter just hit us. Then the next thing I know is the left front cockpit door blows in, and nothing but a fireball comes in. What had exploded was the helicopters had a internal fuel tank, an extra fuel tank in the cargo compartment for their fuel, and that had ruptured and exploded in the crash. And that's why the 3 Marines crewmen in the back didn't survive. The pilot and co-pilot of the helicopter both escaped out of their hatches, but they had severe burns. They had second, third degree burns.
Oh, wow.
But they did escape out of the helicopter, and they were carried to the other aircraft that were there. And so what happened was when that door comes in, the big fireball comes in, and flames are now pretty much all up front. So somebody opened up the left rear paratrooper door. There was nothing but flames. That was the side the helicopter crashed on us. So there was nothing but flames there. So they closed that, and we opened up the right rear paratrooper door, and there was flames and intermittent flames. Now, in the initial fireball, when the spectators that were there, the other people that were there, when they witnessed the helicopter running into us, there was a huge fireball, and our aircraft, they said, disappeared in this fireball initially. So they thought both the helicopter and the fixed wing were totally gone. Then we just started piling out. Dave Cheney, Sergeant Major Cheney said, I hear him yell, "Don't panic." And everybody's just getting out through that door. And I was up near the front, and I did not think it was possible to actually make it to the door. The flames were everywhere. I thought that this was the end, that this was where I would die in that aircraft. And small arms were cooking off. And then when I got to the door, I drove through the door, got to my feet, and just started running away. I could hear hand grenades cooking off that we had. And then we had 6 red-eye missiles on board that aircraft. The red-eye, we had red-eye crew from the 82nd for the red-eyes to provide security, for us at the Desert One site. And those red-eye missiles cooked off, and they were shooting out into the desert, and aircraft were just moving away from us. They were now all aircraft is in motion trying to get away from this fireball and this ammunition blowing up and stuff like that. So initially, aircraft I went to, they waved us away. They were moving away. So I eventually went to another EC-130 and got on that one. And there was the pilot was already on the back of the aircraft, and immediately I could see the pilot was in distress, and he was having difficulty breathing. He was in a lot of pain, and so he had a nylon cord around his neck that was melted into his neck. So I cut that and get the cord out of his way, helped him. And he had inhaled some of the fumes, hot gases and stuff like that. And so we had the pilot and co-pilot on board. And for the 4-hour trip back, I kept the pilot, comfortable as much as we could. And till we got back to Marseria. And so when we did take off out of there, we hit the berm on the road. And next thing I know, we're up and hit that berm and hit it hard and up in the air and back down again. And then we finally get lift off, and they come on the comms on the aircraft and said that we may have damaged our landing gear, so we may not have any good landing gear when we land. And then as we're flying back to Oman, come on and says, well, we might not have enough fuel, so we may have to ditch at sea. So anyway, we made it back to Oman. And then when we got there, then we had got everybody together. We did roll call and grouped up. And then from there, we got on to 2 C-141s and flew back to Wadi Kenya in Egypt, which that was our forward staging base, was Wadi Kenya in Egypt.
Man, you know, when the story started and you said, "Oh, we didn't have accountability," you know, it's easy to fall into the trap of, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking and saying, "Wow, you know, that's like number one, right?" Like in combat operations, knowing where your guys are, who's there, where they are at all times. Accountability is king. That's pure pandemonium. That was, I mean, plus you are in a very, very denied territory. Like it's not just denied territory. Like, okay, we are in a place that we really should not be right now. So that's shocking to me. And when you guys got back and you got accountability, everybody was there besides the KIAs.
Yes. I'm glad we did not leave anybody alive behind.
Good God. That's harrowing. I mean, that's the definition of a harrowing tale. That's incredible. And that's a serious baptism by fire for a brand new unit that was stood up. We knew we had rehearsed our mission. My team's mission was, once we got into the compound, we would go through the back door of the ambassador residence, through the kitchen door. We had big, huge models of this, and we practiced it all over. We'd go up the stairwell to the second floor. So my team's responsibility was the second floor of the ambassador residence, where we thought there'd be some hostages there. And then what we would do is, the team leader and myself, we would go all the way up to the roof of the ambassador residence. We had a rope with us. We'd go to the edge and we'd throw the rope down. And where some of the guys were carrying M72 laws, and they would stack the laws up at the bottom of the building, and Lieutenant Colonel Bucky Burris would then tie up the laws to our rope, and we'd pull the laws up to the roof. So the team leader and I were doing an overwatch on the roof of the ambassador residence to the main gate down below, in case the Iranians reinforcements came through the front gate. We had several laws up there with us. That was our mission. That's incredible. My God. So, all right. So Eagle Claw is a bust. Just everything that could go wrong went wrong. The next big chapter of your career that I want to talk about is Urgent Fury.
Uh-huh.
And everybody knows Grenada because the Rangers love to talk about Grenada. They love it. So again, like that's part of that history that we don't know. We sort of do, but not really know. Like, where does Delta play into this? You know, everybody, yeah, the Rangers love to sing their running cadences about jumping into Grenada and dying, and you know, taking their M60s and things like that. But you know, at least personally, what was Delta Force's mission in Grenada?
Well, I watched the Rangers jump in at Salina Airfield. I was on the ground. So I didn't watch the first batch come in, but we were watching the second group coming in. Okay, Grenada. Well, after Desert One, I want to make one point after Desert One. That when they did the Holloway investigation of what went wrong with that at Eagle Claw, formed up JSOC, Joint Special Operations. was formed up to unify all these different, Air Force, Navy, Marines, everything. So JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, was established following Eagle Claw. And the same thing happened after Urgent Fury. U.S. SOCOM was formed up based on what went wrong on Grenada. So these are two major organizations that were formed up after these two operations.
Was E Squadron or back?
Yeah,
in
we had
the
E
80s,
Squad.
Sea Spray, I think it was called.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that formed because of Eagle Claw? Like,
Yes,
to have
true.
your own. Okay, so to have your own aviators.
Yeah, that was kind of a secret.
Yeah, back then. Yeah.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our mission in Grenada, again, we were out doing mountain training in Washington State when we got the word that to come back. We didn't know why, but we got the call to come back to Fort Bragg. So we had to fly back to Fort Bragg. And then when we got to Bragg, we was told that we were getting ready to invade Grenada. And a lot of people never even heard of Grenada. Why even we were invading Grenada? We had a short time to prepare for that. I was with B Squadron, and our mission was the Richmond Hill prison. The political prisoners, when they had the coup, they put the political prisoners in the prison at Richmond Hill. So our mission was the first mission to go, Richmond Hill prison. And then A Squadron had the Fort Rupert, was supposed to secure Fort Rupert. And so we actually had 8 helicopters that we launched. And this was the first time we used Black Hawk helicopters. We started training with Black Hawks, and so we had 8 Black Hawk helicopters that we were going in. And we were supposed to go into the prison just before first light. And we're going to fast rope in. This fast rope is the first time we're going to be using fast ropes. We trained with fast ropes, and I wrote the SOP on how to use the fast ropes when we first got them.
Really?
My climbing back. Yeah, because I have my climbing background.
Okay.
I instructed rock climbing and mountain climbing, and in the unit, and guided different trips. And so I was a professional member of the American Mountain Guides Association. So I did that besides demo stuff. And so I came up with the SOP, worked on the SOP for the fast rope. And so our team was going to land outside of the prison where the guards were and secure the guard barracks. So we had 8 helicopters. Delta B Squadron was in the first 6 helicopters, and in the second 2 helicopters was SEAL Team 6. So, and we were supposed to go in before first light. Well, things got delayed. So now we're going in daylight. And as we're going over the water, we could monitor radio Grenada. And we could hear that the American invasion of Grenada had begun, for people to grab their rifles and go to the beaches and meet the Americans. So as we went over the beach, there's people out on the beach waving, but you could hear pop. You could hear pop, pop. Somebody's shooting. And then we go there. So the last 2 helicopters, 7 and 8, with the SEAL Team 6. Their mission was the British, what do you call, British consul. I'm trying to think of the term.
Consul General, the consulate.
Yeah, the residence. So
Okay.
he's under house arrest. The British Consul General is under house arrest. They're to go there, and his name's Schoon, and they were to secure his residence and secure his freedom. That's what the SEALs mission was. They had that mission, and they also had the radio station mission to take out the radio station. And so as we flew in to Richmond Hill Prison, above, higher than Richmond Hill Prison is a fort, and that's Fort Frederick, and it's on higher ground above the prison. And as we was coming, 6 helicopters coming in, they started shooting at us from Fort Frederick. They had ZSU 23s set up there, so they were hitting us with 23 millimeter, 50, 12.7. 51 cal, and 7.62. So we were getting, so as we come in, our door gunner immediately gets, I'm in helicopter number 5. Our door gunner on the left side gets shot, and we're so crowded in there. We could not move. Nobody could even get over to take the door gunner's place. And so we were just hovering over our positions and just getting shot at. And then people came out from the prison, and then they were shooting at us from down below, and rounds were going through the bottom of the helicopter. There was a toolbox there. So I went and sat on a toolbox just so I didn't try to not get shot in the butt. So we're hovering there. All we want to do we cannot really return fire, and we have no protection. We don't have any AC-130s. And we don't have any fast movers up in the sky to call in and take out that thing. And I don't know why we didn't have that support. So anyway, we're hovering there. And at that, also helicopter number 4 in front of us, the pilot is mortally wounded, gets shot, and they go down and they crash. Helicopter 4 crashes into the jungle. And then we move off the target area and we do a big circle, and then we come back in to try to go into land again the second time around. Again, as we come back in, the fire is really intense, the shooting and stuff, and all we want to do is get the fast ropes out and get on the ground so we can fight, because you can't really fight from the air. And then we pull on off, and then we land on a hill just above Salinas Airfield there. And then as we land there, we were seeing that watching the Rangers come in and jump on the airfield, and they checked the helicopters out, and of all the helicopters we have, 5 helicopters, only 1 is in condition to fly again. We're all, we had self-sealing tanks and stuff like that, and those tanks even get hit with a 23 millimeter, which they weren't designed to do, still sealed. But we got 1 helicopter, so we put 2 teams on that helicopter, and we went, and I was part of that, and we went back where the 4th, helicopter number 4 had crashed. So we went to the crash site, and so we secured the crash site there, and they brought a medevac helicopter off one of the Navy ships to pick up all of the wounded on board that, and the pilot was killed. So we flew them off to the USS Mossberger. It's a frigate that was off the coast for medical treatment. And then we went back to the airfield. And we just waited there, and we were going to getting ready to do a ground attack on Fort Frederick, Richmond Hill Prison. We were going to back up to the Richmond Hill Prison and get the political prisoners, but that time we got the word that they had released all the political prisoners. So that was the end of our mission. Then, of course, the 82nd came in, and I think it was Colonel Potter, or was he general at the time? He knew that we were there, and he was with the 82nd at that time. He was earlier, during Eagle Claw, he was with the unit. And he wanted the EOD folks in our team to support the 82nd for booby traps and stuff like that. And we were agreeable, but they wouldn't release us to support the 82nd, the EOD folks. So once that was over, we waited for a C-141 and flew out. That was the end of our mission. A Squadron didn't do their mission because the helicopters that they were going to use our helicopters, and they were all shot up.
Man.
So, yeah, you know, there was a lot of resistance, you know, the Cubans and the Grenadians, I think more than what people expected. I heard a story, I can never prove it, but I believe it's true, that the Cubans were notified of the mission ahead of time by State Department, and that they encouraged the Cubans on the island that we were going to not resist the Americans because we're coming in. I think they were totally ready for us, and I believe that's a true story.
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, manned and armed anti-aircraft artillery ready to go as soon as you guys went feet dry on the birds. Like it makes sense.
Yeah, ZSU 23 set up overwatching the prison.
I mean, that's good God. And
Yep.
if you guys don't know, it's a nasty piece of Soviet technology. Think, you know, they got the ZSU-2s and ZSU-4s, and it's just massive 23 millimeter guns, all mounted, you know, either, you know, side by side with the 2s or in quads with the 4s.
Yeah,
And they're fast firing and they're accurate, and it's nasty business.
yeah. These were manually controlled, manually fired, and I tell you, if we had the old Huey helicopters, all 6 of us, 6 helicopters. If we had Hueys instead of the Blackhawks, there would have been 6 Hueys on the ground because we got shot up that bad. Let's see. At the time, Colonel Boykin, now Lieutenant General Boykin, retired. He had a SATCOM radio to his back. On his back, he got hit with a 23 millimeter round in the SATCOM radio, and which took most of the blast, but he lost some of it, the muscle area of his arm from that. But he took a 23 millimeter round
Good
in the
God.
SATCOM radio.
If anything, that just goes to show how massive and cumbersome and heavy those radios were back then.
Yeah, they were.
You know, eating up anti-aircraft around like is, you know, and saves his life.
Yeah.
Again, that's incredible. So
yeah, we had some people like John Ginniff. He was in the crash helicopter. He was medically discharged from back injury. We lost several people. We had, I think, 19 wounded.
Good God.
We had no fatalities, but we had 19 wounded.
And how many operators were on that mission?
Oh gosh, it was B Squadron. If I had to guess how many we had in there, 25 to 30.
And 19 were injured.
Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah, and some of them were hurt pretty bad, but quickly got everybody out off to those Navy ships that were offshore for medical treatment.
Well, I mean, at least the medical PACE plan was in place. It's probably saved a couple lives, honestly.
Yeah. I know Don Breer got shot, and first he got shot in the foot, so he went up and reached down and pick his foot up, and then he got shot in the stomach, and that would have been and he survived and continued on in Delta, but otherwise, yeah, it could have been serious if we didn't have medical attention.
Man, so after Urgent Fury, did you return back to the conventional side, or were you assigned as like an advisor? Because I know you went up to Fort Richardson.
Yeah, I was at E7, and I'm still got my MOS. At the time, EOD was 55 Delta. Today it's 89 Delta. They changed all the MOSs around, but I was still for duty, I was an 11B position, duty position, but my primary MOS was EOD. And I figured in order to be competitive, and I was E7 trying to make E8, I needed to go back to a conventional unit and do time as being an EOD supervisor. And this whole thing, this stuff was pretty hard on families. A lot of times my wife had no idea where I was, what I was doing, when I'd get back. Had wife, 2 kids, small kids. And I figured there's time to take break, go back to an EOD unit and to be competitive for promotion. So I could pick my assignments. So of course I picked Alaska. So I went back as the supervisor of the 176 Ordnance Detachment EOD there at Fort Richardson, which was really great. And but then at EOD work in the wintertime in Alaska, we don't do much work, just train because everything's covered with snow. So all the ranges are covered with snow. And so in January, Bucky Burris calls me up and says, "Hey, Mike, could you come back to the unit, TDY, and help set up an EOD cell in the unit, a regular EOD cell?" So I said, sure, nothing was going on. So I came back to the unit, and what I did was we interviewed EOD folks. So instead of having EOD people as operators, we would have a direct support cell of EOD folks, just like we had a direct support medical cell, we had a direct support commo cell, we'd have an EOD cell that was direct support that they would go through certain portions of OTC. They wouldn't do the CQB stuff. When there was CQB time, they would do advanced EOD training, and we'd set up a cell because we had lost our EOD folks. At that time when I went back to the unit, there was only, I guess just 2 EOD folks still left in the unit at that time. And so I set up interviewed, set up a EOD. So initially we recruited 6 people for the EOD cell. Today, the EOD cell at the unit is a lot bigger than 6. But so they were direct support, and they would be signed to a squadron, 2 EOD techs per squadron at the time, and to do that. So I went back and did that, and then Bucky just said, "Well, could you just come on back?" And I says, "Well, I don't have to wait till the kids get out of school in Alaska and stuff like that." So I figured I'd just come back to the unit. I did my time in Alaska, I had my fun in Alaska, and so I came back to the unit in June of '86. So I came back in there. First, I was in charge of the EOD cell. Then I moved into taking over research and development for the unit. So I was the sergeant major for that. And then I took over the breaching sergeant major, became the breaching sergeant major, and I was in a section called TEOR, was training and evaluation and operational research. So I was the master breacher, developing breaching charges for the unit. That was my thing. And then then of course I made E8, and as soon as the day I made E8, I went down to our admin section, our S1, and said I wanted to transfer to the infantry, to the 11B. I knew I would never be competitive to make E9 in the EOD. We only had 13 E9 slots in the EOD. I had no school instructor time. I had no control detachment time. And so I figured I'd be more competitive with my background in infantry than in EOD. So they went down to S1, and I said I wanted to transfer to the infantry, and they thought I was crazy. And they said, well, if you go to infantry, you got to go through infantry school. You can't
No.
yeah, they told me I have to go through infantry school. And I says, Fort Benning. And I says, okay. I says, get me a school date for Fort Benning. I'll go through infantry school as a E8, do the CIB and all that, and I'll do it. And they put it in my paperwork in, and they said, no, you don't have to go there. But I tell you, Nick, I know a E7 that did the same thing and had to go to infantry school.
No way.
Yes, he did. He went down there. They had no idea what to do with him. So they just they didn't want him really with the students, these infantry students. So they just kept him separate. He did all the testing out stuff. And so they just said, okay, you're infantry. And so, but as an E7, he went through.
You can't, like, you can't do that. You can't put a guy in from the unit, CIB, all that. It's been in the Army for, God, if he's an E7, what, 12, 13, 14 years? And put him in with a bunch of 18-year-olds. My God, I can't imagine. I mean,
it would have been fun. I would have enjoyed it.
No, you would have spent all your time being inundated with questions from kids.
But so I put in for it, and I, of course, made E9 in infantry, but it did not change what I did at the unit. My job at the unit, I was still a master EOD, a master breacher, but then in I think it was '92, I went over to JSOC. Yeah, I was still assigned to the unit, but for duty at JSOC. So from '92 to '96, I was the exercise sergeant major. We set up 4 of these JRTXs, Joint Readiness Training Exercises. And so my job was to go out, select training sites for the exercise sites. And then I was usually the controller on the Ranger site. I always got the Ranger target and to be the safety controller on the Ranger target. So I did that. And then from there, I went to, they set up in JSOC, a J3 Special Plans cell. So I was the J3 Special Plans Sergeant Major until I retired. And my job was basically target defeat of hardened targets, which we would, like bunkers, deep underground bunkers, and different structures that were difficult to get in. Ways to breach into these structures and to destroy them after we capture them. So that's what I did.
So kind of taking that, and I want to go back a little bit because you and I discussed it before I started recording. So kind of in that same realm of bunker busters and things like that, Desert Storm was the proving ground for this, for the Blue series of bombs, which were hardened penetrators. But this came up because I had asked you, and you're about to blow the internet's mind right now, because the photo of the guy on Schwarzkopf's PSD, which has always been credited to being you,
right?
And the aesthetic inspiration for the legendary Sicario character Steve Forsing, which now people combine, myself included, you and Steve Forsing, and that's not you.
That's not me.
Oh man.
I wasn't on the security protection detail for Schwarzkopf. We had people from Delta that did that, and the person that's on that people claim to be me is a good friend of mine, unit member. That's Bill Cronin. Bill's a little bit taller than me. He had dark hair, he wore glasses. But that's Bill Cronin.
Man,
not me.
Not you, but you were involved with that developing like those the bunker busters, and you had started talking a little bit about the GBU-28, which I'd never heard of. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that.
I have a lot. I can send you a lot of information, Nick, on the GBU-28. It's a great story. There was two bunkers that we were interested in Iraq during Desert Storm. One of them was at Salmon Pack. they Salmon Pack area is a chemical, it was a Iraqi chemical and bio facility. And there was a particular bunker there at Salmon Pack that believed to have chemical munitions in it. And we wanted to destroy that. So we were trying to develop a way of to destroy that bunker and to destroy the chemical munitions that was, with using thermal heat and stuff, to develop a bomb that would be like a thermobaric type bomb to destroy that. But then there was also, we might have to go in there on the ground to take that facility if we couldn't take it out by air. And the other facility that we were interested in was Taji number 2. Taji number 2 is a command and control facility outside of Baghdad. It's a 2-story cut and cover facility. And so they dug a big hole in the ground. They built a huge 2-story structure in there, covered it back up. They poured a huge concrete bursting slab on top of that, and then they covered that up. So it had a bursting slab. It was an elaborate facility. Right at the beginning of the war, the Air Force dropped 60 Blue 109s, Blue standing for Bomb Live Unit 109s, which is a 2,000-pound bomb built out of special steel. It was our at the time, it was our bunker buster bomb, but it was only 2,000 pounds. They dropped 60 on the facility. You can see the craters on the facility. They did not damage the facility, did not take it out of operation. They did nothing to the facility as far as we could determine. So we were going to have to do a ground assault on that. And we knew a lot about the facility. We had satellite imagery as it was being built. The Swiss company was involved in it. We got blueprints. We got a lot of information. We knew quite a bit about the 2-story cut and cover facility. But it was going to be a Ranger Battalion mission. And then there'd be 2 of us breachers from Delta that would go on with the Rangers. And I would take a small Ranger team, train them to be my breachers, my assistant breachers, and another guy would do that. And we would tack 2 of those bunker bomb blast doors. He would do one, I would do one, and gain entry into the facility. The Rangers would take the facility out, and then we would destroy the facility. So that was a mission that I was working on. Instead of doing Schwarzkopf protection, I was involved in taking out this underground. And I thought, this is a great mission. But, we had not a capability to take this out. Well, the only thing that we had that you could, at the time, to take it out was a B-61, which
Nuclear.
is B-61? It's a nuclear bomb. So this is in theory, this is a target that we would take that would be a typical target for a B-61, a nuclear bomb. Well, we're not going to start using nuclear bombs taking out targets in Iraq and starting that conversation. So we did not have a way to take it out. Initially, I had to brief, General Steiner came, and I had to brief him on the mission. He came down there. He was SOCOM General Carl Steiner at the time. And I started out the briefing to General Steiner. I says, if you roll back time, and today is 1945, that bunker would have been gone. In 1945, we could take that out, and today we cannot take it out. And since in 1945, there was 2 bombs. We had the 12,000-pound tall boy bomb, and we had the 22,000-pound Grand Slam bomb. These are British bombs. They were actually cast here in the United States, sent over by ship to Britain. They were filled up. These were what you call your dam buster type bombs. They were Brits were flying specially modified land casters, and they were taking out submarine pins. These submarine pins sometimes they had 10 meters of reinforced concrete, and these bombs were taking those out, the 12,000. And we took out railroad tunnels, We took out aqueducts, and we took out some dams. We had a special dam buster bomb too during the Brits did, but we had those. And then shortly after the war, we developed the T-12 bomb. Have you ever heard of the T-12 bomb?
I have not.
The T-12 bomb is a 43,000 pound conventional bomb. And we developed the T-12 bomb. And at the time, I knew of 2 of them that were still in existence. And we dropped these out in the deserts in Western California and tested them out. The T-12, when we tested the T-12 bomb, we dropped them from a modified, B-28 bomber, but they were actually going to be used in the B-36s, so we did have these. I forget how many we made, like 60 of the T-12 bombs. And at the time, there was 2 of them I knew in existence, and I told General Steiner we could fill them up and then drop those bombs. One was at Eglin Air Force Base at the Armament Museum in Eglin, out in front. Laying horizontally is a T-12 bomb. Have you ever been to Eglin?
I have.
Yeah, at the Armament Museum.
I was training. I didn't have time to sightsee.
Oh, you didn't? Oh, that's a great. If you're ever down there, though, go to the Armament Museum at Eglin Air Force Base. It's really good. And so I said, one's there. One of them's standing on its nose at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and like that. I says, but what happened was somewhere along the line, these type targets became tactical nuke targets, and we didn't develop a capability to take them out. But what happened was there was this officer in New York, and I forget where he was, but they had a stockpile of 8-inch gun barrels just laying around. And this officer, wondered if he could just turn one of those 8-inch gun barrels into a bomb, put a nose cap on it, throw some fins on it, put a guidance unit on it, and create a bomb out of it. And they did it in 28 days. So it became known as the GBU-28. From the first time they test dropped them in Eglin, out at Eglin Air Force Base, the GBU-28s. So they weighed about 4,200 pounds now, these bombs. So they had 2 of them. So they had 2 F-111s. This is the last day of the war. 2 F-111s. They had 1 GBU-28 on one wing, 2 2,000-pound bombs on the other wing just to counterbalance it. And they flew it into the Taji number 2 thing. The first aircraft comes in, and he launches his GBU-28, and it misses the target. And the second one comes around, and drops its GBU-28, and I've seen the film footage. It comes in, it goes top dead center into the bunker, goes down into the bunker, and next thing you know, you feel the explosion. You see these bomb blast doors just blow off into the desert, and it took it out on the last day of the war, the GBU-28. It's an amazing story.
That is, and that's some
to
serious
develop
ingenuity.
a bomb that quick.
That's some serious ingenuity. We're gonna take old 8-inch gun barrels. we're gonna strap some fins and a nose cone with a fuse, and we're gonna slap a JDAM unit on it to provide some guidance, and that's what got done. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's known as the Sodomsizer. That's what it was called. Of course, now we have the Moab, the massive ordnance air blast bomb, or the mother of all bombs, and we have the MOP too today, which is the massive ordnance penetrator.
Yes.
So, are you familiar with the MOP?
I am. I've never seen one in person. I really enjoy the photos of it being strapped to the bottom of a B-52 because it doesn't fit into the bomb bay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Moab was dropped out of the back of a C-130. That was the only way.
Just like the old 15,000-pound bombs we used in Vietnam. which people called them the daisy cutters, but in Vietnam they were called the cheeseburgers because we already had daisy cutters. There was a 10,000 pound, I forget the nomenclature of it, but we had in the first part of the war, we had 10,000 pound bombs that we called daisy cutters. These were left over from World War II. We had these bombs in World War II, these 10,000 pound bombs. And so they were the daisy cutters. And then they came out with the 15,000 pound, the blue 83s. And we called them the cheeseburgers. I don't know how I got the name cheeseburger, but it's filled with basically ammonia nitrate and propane. So we used those. We used those quite a bit during the Cambodian incursion to make helicopter landing zones. So they had a long extended nose fuse. They would drop off the back end of a C-130 and parachute drone, a drogue chute to keep them going with the right direction. They would land. They would blow the jungle away. And then it was instant HLZ, but then you had to send engineers in because it was impenetrable to get out of it because all the debris and stuff was piled up along the edges. So engineers had to come in with big, huge saws to cut their way out. But, and the last time they used one was in Afghanistan. And so the stockpile, the blue 83s, 15 are gone. If you want to see one, there's only one in existence today, and that's at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, really? That's not too far from me.
Yeah. So they have one. I know the guy who was responsible of saving the last one to put in a museum. Otherwise, they'd all be gone. So that's where if you want to see one of those.
That is an amazing piece of history. Hold on one second. I apologize. Oh, man. Sorry about that. Thought I had that taken care of, but that's an incredible piece of history, Sergeant Major. That's, again, like these are stories that you don't hear about. I heard a few stories when I went through SOTAC out at Yuma. You hear some stories about daisy cutters. Well, the blue 83s of what we knew, what's known in common vernacular. About the massive ordnance penetrator, and the Moab was dropped. That was right after my last deployment with 5th Group. They dropped that, and that the JTAC that got to call it in, he had a big chip on his shoulder after that because he had dropped the largest bomb in the United States inventory. So good for him. I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous at all.
Yeah.
But, well, Sergeant Major, it is an absolute pleasure talking to you. I don't want to keep you too long. This was incredible. I've said it once. I've said it a million times. The whole reason I do these is to hear stories that you don't hear. And you've shared, God, half a dozen, the details that nobody ever knows. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome, Nick.
I know everybody's really excited to hear this. So, guys, if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, the whole shindig. If you guys are listening on Spotify or iTunes, do me a favor and give me a 5-star review. We can keep doing interviews like this because that gives me a little bit of clout. Because I've said it, I'm the world's most okayest Green Beret, so I don't have a whole lot of clout in these parts. But if we want to hear from people who aren't okay, like Sergeant Major here, that goes a long way. So once again, Sergeant Major, thank you so much, and take care.
Okay. I'll send you some information you'll be interested in.
Please do.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Sergeant Major.
You're welcome.